Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Workforce 4.0. I'm your host, Ann Wyatt. I'm so excited to have Soren Peters with us here today. Soren is the CEO of HowToRobot. If you've been at a trade show recently, you have no doubt seen their amazing shirts, like the I Like You a Bot shirts and the ever popular Automate Everything But Happy Hour. Those are always a huge hit. And if you haven't been to a trade show, you are probably well familiar with the HowToRobot crew on LinkedIn. So Soren, I'm so happy to have you today. I love what you all are up to at HowToRobots, and it's going to be such a great conversation.
Let's bet on that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you? For those that maybe have not been to a trade show, or maybe they're not on LinkedIn listening in today, describe yourself, Soren Peters, as the iconic CEO of HowToRobots, and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I think the only iconic part is probably that I'm pretty tall and have this terrible half Danish accent. That, but that is kind of a mix. I've also been living in Chicago and now here in Nashville, and then a little bit of Danish. So that might be the iconic part. But no, I think yeah, I'm fronting here at How to Robot, and I think I did quite a lot of years in IT when that was. It's still a thing, but it was growing in the 90s and grew up with that and got familiar with robots some maybe 10 years ago and was pretty amazed by maybe not the robot itself, but I mean that's fantastic technically as well, but I think what things it tees up for us in the future, what it does to our workforce exactly and our humanity basically, I think. So yeah.
And that's a huge reason of why I wanted you come on the show today and share a little bit more about your perspectives on that. But before we get to all that, there's a simple question I got to know more about Soren Peters here. Is what is your go-to karaoke song or even your favorite song?
Yeah, so the thing is, I actually do play music, which you didn't know asking this
I
question.
did
So
not know.
So that also means that karaoke is probably one of the worst things you can ever put me through because I actually enjoy people that can sing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most awkward moments or moments that I wanted to flee, probably is the right word, most in my life is in Copenhagen, where I lived many years in Denmark. There's a little bar called Sam's Bar, which is the old show you guys had that was called Cheers. The
Oh
Danish
yeah.
the Danish translation is called Sam's Bar. Don't go into that. And someone did a karaoke bar in the middle of the pedestrian street in central Copenhagen. And for some reason, it is mostly foreign Asian tourists that decides to visit that bar. And now they just I think, kind of took it all the way through and are now selling little boxes with Asian food as well. But they do have a karaoke scene, and I had an office pretty close by, so I went in there one night, and I've never gotten out of a place that fast again. That was Sweet Home Alabama they were singing, and it actually
Ah.
it took me a minute and a half to realize, being a musician, that it was Sweet Home Alabama we were singing. I say we because we weren't, but I actually do like Sweet Home Alabama. I sing
Okay.
it myself in my old band. So yeah, I don't know. I like a ton of things, and I think depends on. Don't you feel that way? That depends on where you're at and what you're doing. I hate flying, for example. I
Mm-hmm.
do nothing
I do
else than sit
too.
in there. Yeah, I sit in an airplane 3 times a week internationally and all that. So I do noise canceling phones, and I listen to classical themes when we on very high volume when we you know climb, because then my
Mm-hmm.
idea is that at least I'll go out with a bang in a happy way to Lord of the Rings or something like that. But I probably wouldn't listen to that at home. So yeah, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
get that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have no idea what to answer, but I can tell you no song is my favorite karaoke song.
I got you.
Yeah.
I understand. Sweet Home Alabama is popular here.
In Europe too, for some reason.
Yeah.
Although might be a little southern, but yeah, no, it's I think for most Europeans that's like, hey, this is the U.S. Sweet Home Alabama. Whether that's true or not, I'll leave that up to people too. But for us, it's a song that connects, and it's three chords, and it's pretty easy to sing, and even if you're pretty drunk, you are able to still sing it as well. So we play it in a band because we play at weddings and things like that. And people get drunk, so it's popular.
No, that's really cool. What's your one of your favorite songs? So I did not know that you played in a band and you did that. That's really awesome. What musical instrument do you play?
I play bass
Nice.
because it kind
Okay.
of fits my voice. So yeah, I'll be a terrible
And
violin.
yeah. And what's your favorite song to play when you all are playing your gigs, your weddings and all those things, your shows?
Oh man, actually, I think it's Get Lucky with Daft Punk because it's
Nice.
four chords. It's super simple. It kind of plays itself, but that
Yeah.
everybody loves that song, and it's just one of those songs where everybody likes it. It's that, or it's 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton, because
Oh yeah.
especially being a bass player, you can have fun with that. And it's old classic songs, Money for Nothing, things like that. I think my musical interest kind of stopped late 90s. I've kind of forgot to listen to music on the radio after that. So I don't know. Yep.
I mean, you haven't missed much, I don't think. I mean, well, maybe a little, but not
Yeah.
like, you know.
I don't know. It's just it's one of those things where you got your things, right. So what I hear personally is one thing, and what I play in a band is different, because you play the things people want to dance to, and that might not be what you put on your speakers at home, because you on a regular Friday night when you had a tough week, maybe don't want to dance to Whitney Houston, in your kitchen. Maybe you want to. I don't know.
I
I
mean, I
rarely
usually I
dance
usually
to Whitney
cry to
Houston.
Whitney Houston on my Friday nights after a tough week. Kinda
Exactly. And biggest female hit I think ever, but originally done by Dolly Parton. So yeah. So
awesome.
there you go.
That's really cool. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. That's awesome. I love music, so that's kind of my icebreaker for the show. So I appreciate your input on that. But Soren, I think that you've done such an amazing job with How to Robot building a sense of community throughout, just like on your social media channels, but also at shows. I was at several shows that How to Robot was at this year already. So Assembly Show South there in Nashville, where I think we first met each other,
Mhm.
and then Automate, of course. And everyone is always kind of huddled around the How to Robot booth, and it's kind of interesting how you all have managed to grow your own little audience in manufacturing. So I've got to know, is that part of the How to Robot mission? I mean, I imagine that it is, right? And how important is that part to How to Robots to create and streamline that sense of community among systems integrators and manufacturers?
I think it has become like even more important that you would think, and that we had thought of. And I think what you and I are doing right now is also a thing where I would never have thought, podcast and manufacturing happy hour and all these other shows
Yeah.
are getting such big traction in manufacturing as they are. I mean, obviously, probably, but who would have known some years back? I think I think every time there is a big change, there's also got to be some movement, some streams to follow. And I think we just try to be one of those streams where back in the IT days, as I, of course, like to talk about, because then I can sound old, is that, or wise maybe even, which isn't the case. There
Definitely
was
wise.
Yeah, well, but there was these. I think we called them evangelists, which is probably very biblical. But these were the guys that talked about, cloud or whatever it was. And I think it was the most terrible way of naming a person. I would, if there was one thing I never want to be, was an evangelist. But on the other hand, I think I realized that those guys made us listen to some tracks that kind of moved the needle a little bit in different
Hmm.
ways. And whether we like Steve Jobs or all the other guys, they also have their mission in, dragging us along a storytelling about a mission or a way, a path to follow. So I think what we realized is, I mean, and I'll be the first to admit that, and probably have to, we thought after doing consulting for a while that, just adding a buying platform on a site with all the vendors on the planet, obviously all the guys is going to jump on there, buy everything on there, and all the sellers would sell, and it's going to be fantastic. And it definitely was not, because you know, we never realized how off we were in timing on people doing that. I think I read an analysis once on B, and one of the things that I didn't know was that they spent a ton of money in their first years on photographers.
Huh.
Yeah, exactly. And I was wondering why. Well, because when Ann Wyatt wants to rent out her apartment, it might look amazing. I've never seen it, but it might look amazing. But maybe Ann Wyatt is a dumbass with a camera. I know I am.
Yeah.
So it might be,
Yeah. Well, there have been times now that you mention it that Ann Wyatt's
yeah.
not been
So the
great
point is,
at
maybe you live
taking
in a place that looks like the
photos.
Vatican and Michelangelo's, all that, but because you're a dumbass with a camera, it doesn't on pictures. And I think the point is that they couldn't get people to rent those apartments because they look like shit on photos, even though they weren't. So they ended up paying photographers to go out to people and visit them and take photos of their apartments so that the topics suddenly become sellable.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we realized is that we are kind of on the same mission. We have to shed a light on a lot of things that aren't not shed a light on these days, which is like all the little puzzle things that needs to fit together for a guy to, you know, actually jump on a manufacturing opportunity, or for someone to jump on a robot. I mean, what is these things? And if there is a lot of adoption in robot right now, people are buying it. But if you look at what I think is the potential, we haven't seen half of it, or maybe not even a tenth of it, right? So if you want the mass adoption, you
Yeah.
got to make it popular. You got to make it mainstream. And sometimes I do feel like listening to a very clever engineer sharing his wisdom on a robot might not be the mainstream thing that is necessary. So I think what we're trying to do is that. So it's just as much as we're serious about what we do, we also need to find a way to make the approach to it a little less steep.
Yeah.
That's the real
Absolutely.
thing.
I mean, that's a huge thing that I tell people often is, look, I'm not the most technical person in manufacturing because that's not really my role, but it depends on, who I guess traditionally, your target buyer in hardware like and machinery like robotics would be, a plant manager or somebody in operations or, someone in, technology implementation. But really, it's not just that one person that you have to convince. A lot of times, like, think about in any business, I think, the CFO plays a huge role in what's what's approved and what is not
It's true.
in manufacturing and really in all business, and that's their job, right? So how do
Yep.
we make it approachable for a CFO even to
True.
think about?
No, but true. And I think that's the whole point. It is that, we have to get the technicalities out of it a little bit, and because that would widen the horizon for a variety of buyers that may not be as comfortable in approaching these things. And if we want the workforce and everybody else to change gear, if we want to be more competitive in in countries where labor are both asking for better jobs, but also salary wise are a little more competitive or less competitive, then there's just that we need to make this accessible in a not so technical way. So I think that's what we're trying to do with the t-shirts. That's what we're trying to do with the platform. That's what we're trying to do with the consultancy, is just make this so much easier for the guys that think that this is something for them to do. But also the things that were difficult, 3 years ago. How do we commoditize that a little bit more and then
Mm.
make room for the things that are now more difficult? They get a little bit of more space and things like that. I mean, so it's not a big thing to make an electric car right now, but I remember a friend of mine buying his first Tesla in, I don't know, 13 or whatever, and we all
Yeah.
watched it. Today's, if someone buys a Tesla, I might be polite and say, "Oh, what a nice car," but that's as far as it will go, probably, But so it will commoditize. It'll move downwards, and I think communication, I think what we do and things like that, your podcast here and things like that does that. It helps ease the barrier, lower the barrier to pick up of this
Yeah.
and take some of the fears away. So if you run around with a T-shirt that says "I build robots to impress my cat," you know, or behind every robot is a caffeinated engineer, whatever they say, right? We've also got a ton of others that we didn't dare print because they could be misunderstood in many ways. But yeah, I think it helps.
It does help, and it kind of bridges that gap, which is really what we're trying to do in not only providing solutions, but also attracting people to the workforce. And I just love that. I think you guys are absolutely nailing that part of getting the word out there on what you all are about and building that sense of community. And I'm so excited to have met a lot of your folks with How to Robot and, befriend them over the years for sure. But how is that sense of community, why is that important to you? Is that important to you, Soren Peters, the person?
No, I think it is. I really think it
Yeah.
is because I think it's a good question. I think I realized that almost, everything is in the end some kind of transaction, whether but I think even sometimes a marriage is, but if you don't ease that transaction, if you don't, make the journey a little bit more comfortable, then it won't be pretty funny, right? So I think that goes for everything I do as well. There's just so many things that we can improve on. The little journeys they have every day, everything we do, and everything we try to accomplish in a day. There is ways to make it super comfortable, and there's ways to definitely not do that, right? And for me,
Mm.
as a foreigner with my terrible accent, one thing that I will say, and I'll say this to the entire American population, is stop those voice machines because us that doesn't have us that have a thick accent can't use them. So if
Yeah,
I call Chase and say, hey, they'll say, say yes if you're. I'll always say yes. Sorry, I didn't get that. Then you know press one if I want to skip that terrible invention that doesn't work.
that's facts. Hey, don't feel bad because they don't work for me either, and I
Well, there
just
you
think
go.
it's beyond, like, Southern.
And exactly. Well, I don't know about that. I think there's a fantastic little thing going around on YouTube that's pretty old, but it's an elevator someone installed. It's a joke, obviously, but they installed it in Scotland, and which is probably also a city in Kentucky. But here's the actual country of Scotland, and there's a voice elevated, active voice activated elevator, and you can just see these two Scots saying that is just about the dumbest thing. No one, because he'll say 11,
Right,
and the elevator say, "Excuse, please state the floor you want." 11, and
right.
they'll never get to that floor. And I think so so for me, if we can find a way to just help ease the journey onto something that is new or different, for me as a person, it means a lot. Um, because I think we all experience that. I mean, and look at my mom. She had to get used to digital ID and things like that. Er, we have to go that way. We can't just because she's my mom and 70 plus, we can't say that we're not going to do that, but we have to find a way to do that. So when I remember when Denmark changed digital IDs, we have one digital ID, we can access anything if I weren't living here, but when I lived there, I could access my medical records, anything with one ID. Super
Yeah,
smart. Yes, super smart. But there was a lot of people that didn't know how to. So all the libraries. So when we did the change and you had to use your ID, all the libraries also equipped a couple of persons with some kind of desk where you could come and get help if you didn't know how
ah,
to. So the first 10 times you were uncomfortable about it, you went to the library and you had a cup of coffee and you sat down and you got the help. And eventually, we actually managed, I think, to get most of the population to love or hate or whatever they do, but still use that ID. But so that's my point is that there's a road there on adoption that we need to do. So just as much, jumping the gun a little bit, but just as much as we are talking about educating the guy that is operating a robot, I think it's just as important that we look at the entire factory and say, guys, who else is uncomfortable about this thing standing in here? It's
Right.
in your vicinity. Why don't we just share a little knowledge about that and not only skill the guy that's going to operate it, but actually most of you who, if you don't want to, walk in its vicinity, well, why don't we, just help you a little bit? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think there's a part there to play.
It goes a long way. Like just saying, how can I help you? To even like your frontline workforce and everyone in your organization, that just goes such a long way, and it does build community along the way. I love that.
True.
That's
So,
awesome.
yes.
So, yeah. Well, I think, I think your thoughts on community and coming from that POV as a leader are super important to not only building community, but it's also inspiring to other people that are maybe looking at you in a place of leadership and thinking, I really aspire to be, a CEO like Soren Peters at some point in my career. But I got to ask, for those that are maybe interested in hearing that aspect of the show today, what does that leadership look like to you? And how important is that term to your own career? And then what impact do you hope that you have on others out there that maybe have those same career ambitions?
I will say if there's anyone sitting out there thinking I want to be that guy, probably would say, with my Danish ancestry, that you should stop drinking but and maybe get a quick talk with you shrink. But no, I think what we're trying to do inspire, inspire to is more kind of a thought leadership, but also, I mean, I remember when we started out both on the consultancy and the platform, and some of the first things we try to share was this, idea of visibility on the journey people are going through to buy a robot. And quite a lot of integrators in Europe at that time actually had a lot of pushback on it and
Hmm.
said that that was necessary. They technically, and I got that in writing from a couple of people, they technically told us that clarity was necessary. And I remember I said, "What? How can it be bad to get a few offers from the market just to gauge whether this is, $1 million or 200? Some integrator might be wrong or have seen the project in a way that it shouldn't be seen. I mean, we're all humans." And I got that in
Yeah.
writing too from a couple of integrators back in the day that said, "Yeah, no, no one would use three quotes. Doesn't make sense." So I mean, I literally have that people saying clarity is not a thing, and you should only work with one vendor in the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I, of course, seen from a sales perspective, can appreciate that. The funny thing is, just imagine you're not on that winning sales team, but on the sales team that didn't win. Then you would kind of hope that they weren't so one way minded. So I think it's just, I think where we are now, we're definitely seen as more of a independent source. When we write an article, we're trying not to advertise for anyone, or we're trying to not do these things, but literally just say, hey, there's opportunities within welding. If you didn't know, there's enormous opportunities with welding and robots. And sometimes the integrators or OEMs felt, well, they know that. Well, no, they don't. Some do, agreed, but some don't.
Not
So
everyone.
exactly, so make room for that, please, right? And I think there's that. And I think also when we did a number of seminars, when we started back in Europe, about robots and people, and the clashes there, because there was quite a lot of good cases to
It's
base
my
a few
favorite.
stories around. Yeah, yeah, and
It's my
and there
favorite
was,
subject. Robots
no, I
and people.
remember. I mean, one of the things we've done a lot is help hospitals automate their logistics chain, and things like that. And And there's good and bad use cases. And I remember there was a case in Scandinavia. I won't mention any names, but I think it was 2017, and they was all over the news that they had bought mobile robots for their logistics, and they even painted them pink and gave them names. And as I said, all over the news, Brave New World, fantastic. It wasn't that much all over the news 2 years later when those robots were standing in a corner with all their wires cut because they forgot to kind of tell the people at the hospital that they were introducing them. And so the reaction, of course, was to throw bicycles in the hallways and block the paths so that they could assault the robot and cut the wires or things like that, right? So, and nothing wrong with that. All they tried to do was help the guys not push so heavy loads so their backs would be fine. But they just forgot to tell them. They read it out in the newspaper, and it was a mess. So one of the things we learned is that when we started doing helping hospitals do these things, get in front of it, talk to the people first. Hey, you guys, we're trying to do this, and the purpose is this. And you should be afraid, but we need to get you educated because now you're going to ease the life of those robots that's going to haul the heaviest loads. But that also means, guys, that you don't have to haul linen anymore. You can haul passengers. In other words,
Yeah.
patients, and you can actually be part of the warmth that a health system should offer its patients and not be the guy pushing linen in the basement. So you're technically being upgraded, but it's a it's a song, it's something you got to sing first. If not, they'll definitely see it as, okay, so it's taking my job. Okay, not happening.
Yeah.
um and then there's humanoid aspect, sorry, humane aspects of it too. I read there was a Danish guy who wrote an article this morning about obviously AI and where do we stop and where do we start and when does it become dangerous and all these things. But one of the things that I remembered was that one of the hospitals, we were debating how we could help them and what we could transport with those robots, or they were technically discussing with themselves what they can transport. One of the things that a hospital do transport is corpses. So where do
Yes.
you kind of draw the line? Is linen okay? Is food okay? Do you want your food transported on a robot that just moved Mr. Smith down to the, you know, morgue 10 minutes earlier? I mean, where's practicality? Where is how we see these things, and where's the normality at? And how does that affect the people that are working with the robots as well? How do
Yeah.
we how do we talk about that? So I think we learned that some of the things that we do is not only technical and what's possible, but also kind of talking into how the technology kind of merge with the people.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so I could see that, you don't necessarily want to be served by an AMR that has just,
Oh, and you don't
also
know. I get it. You don't know, but it's
done
just,
that, but
what if someone
maybe we
found
have
out?
different two different robots.
Or maybe you don't want to do that because people will see the robot transporting Mrs. Smith, and a robot has an accident and drops him or whatever. I mean, that's the whole. There's so many discussion here to be had. And I think this
Yeah.
is not about robots, but a funny thing. I was in Poland, and there was three factories side by side, and they all did electronics, and two of them couldn't get people. They had, I mean, simply couldn't get people enough. Whereas the third factory had no problem getting people, all good. And I was curious to why, because there was a line outside Factory 3 with people applying for a job, and the other two didn't. It had windows.
Oh, yeah.
So
Windows are
sometimes it's
nice.
as basic as that, right? We
Yeah.
all,
I've been in a lot of plants that don't have windows.
but there you go. So maybe I mean, so my point is there's so many things on this whole journey with, going towards building better factories and things like that means so much more than we're used to.
Yeah.
So for me,
It's
that's leadership.
interesting.
Shedding a
Yeah.
light sometimes on things that people don't think about or haven't noticed. I think is and I think doing that, then you can only hope that eventually this will pick up and people will, you know, at least add windows to their new factory or whatever necessary, just because I sat here and said I think it was a pretty dumb idea not to. So if I'm lucky, there's one guy listening and he'll put some windows in that factory because maybe,
Yeah. That would be
engineer.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And yeah, natural light, there's a lot to be said about natural light. I mean, even, you can I have houseplants, so in the winter I have to bring them inside. They hate the winter inside. They hate the winter inside even though the winter is climate controlled inside for them. I mean, because they just do not do well without real light. And I think humans are kind of like that. But as a leader, I think that that's a great point that you make about like shining light on the things that no one seems to notice, but that are important conversations to have. And I really resonate with that because I kind of try to do the same. Do you ever feel like as a leader, like how do you influence and make a positive impact by doing that? Or do you feel like it's like your responsibility to? I feel responsible. I'm like when I go out of this world, I want to make sure that these things were looked at and like we weighed all of these decisions out before we just went and shot from the hip and made a bunch of decisions that maybe impact our future generations. But do you feel like
I
'cause
don't know if
I get attached. I don't know.
no, I do that too. I don't know if I ever put words on that in the sense that, I think, and I'm not saying I'm, good at it, but I think, and this is going to be a very philosophical thing, but so let's do that quick. But I think our legacy is, what we create while we're here, and I think I think as much as we can, just move the needle a little bit every day that we're here. I'm pretty sure that every time I go to bed and then feel that I move the needle for some people, there's obviously also going to be people that are going to think that I didn't do them any favors that day because they think I'm an idiot or hard-headed or yelled or whatever I did. But but I think all in all, I think our purpose here is just to do that every day, and we all do that in our little ways. So so how do you just, sometimes you help people in the way that they probably didn't need help that day, and sometimes you actually do manage to help them in a way that makes sense for them that day. But I think the one thing that I always think about, whether I live up to it every day is probably a different discussion, but at least I think about it is, you know, you you shouldn't buy people for their birthday present what you want them to have, right? And you should
Yeah,
buy what they need. And I
that's
think
right.
we all, yeah. So, you know, um, you cook steaks for your wife, and you probably, there might be some that think that's great, but there also might be some that would rather have, a fancy fish dinner or a little glass of rosé or whatever they, we're different. My point is just, on the other hand, I probably wouldn't be too happy to what do you say, too happy about a vegetable lasagna with some homemade juice. I mean, I appreciate the thought, but I probably want the steak instead. So,
I get
and I
it.
think in
Yeah.
everything we do, I think that's our job, right? And I think, let's not install robots for the sake of you or for the robot, but and for the sake of getting to Industry 4.0, but let's look at, what makes sense and how do we get to that point as fast as possible. I think that's the chance we have to make an impact. So whether, we're doing that or not, I don't know, but I think we're trying. At least we're trying to level the playing field in buying and selling of robots in automation, both, for the buyers, but also for the sellers. Although I think both parties sometimes think we don't. But yeah,
It is what it is, right?
exactly. And
Yeah.
and sometimes you just see what they don't, because I've seen, thousands of offers across the platform now, and that also means I see all the shitty offers. That also means that, you'll know which
Yeah.
one is going to resonate and which one is not. And you tell that to the seller, and he'll say, "Yeah, no, no, no. We did that 50 times over." And okay, and how many deals did you won? Yeah, but
Yeah.
okay, so yeah, I think that's what you can do.
That's some good gems in that thought piece, I think, for sure. Thank you for that. And I'm glad that you brought up, robots and use cases for robotics in hospitals and other industries. That kind of leads me into this conversation about technology and how we think that technology will ultimately impact the way that we work. how do you think like in 10 or 15 years from now, how do you think we'll work with technology? And do you think there'll be that incremental of an impact?
Oh yeah. But if you think about it, what what where technology really picked up was when we converted it from technology to something very usable, like, one of those.
Mm. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, so the transformation is where I think it's going to take place. So you know, if you're the harder it is to program a thing to do something for you, the less of an adoption, obviously, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I also think I said it before a show in London somewhere, and I said, the more we say custom, there is a chance that if we say custom enough, we say it because we're proud of custom, and custom sounds like craftsmanship, which is great. But
Sure.
there's also a lot of things that this is not no more craftsmanship. This is just now a thing that's been mass produced, and there is
Yep.
beauty in that too, right? There was craftsmanship, big craftsmanship in this, and there is, of course, every day. But my point is just that I think the mass adoption thing and getting over that hump is going to be about making it super accessible. And that doesn't mean I can buy it anywhere. That makes the way I can approach it. And buying a robot is still not common knowledge. Common knowledge is you buying a car. You might be, their person that has, her head mostly buried in the sand for the last 30 years, and still you kind of have an idea of which car to buy and what you're supposed to be looking for, crazy enough. So we
Mm.
kind of have that with us, all of us now, but because our dad or mom or whatever friends told us about what was a good thing, what was a bad thing. Hey, about this XYZ car, it was a shit show. And then about this one, it was amazing. You mix all this together and you get an idea, and then you go out buy it. We're not there with adoption of automation or robots yet. So you personally maybe don't have an opinion about it, also the knowledge to do that. So the
Yeah.
quicker we can transform that into something that is as accessible as this, the faster it'll go. And I think we're some way from that yet. But of course, how the robot was constructed with that purpose. You know, you should be able to just record a video of what you guys are doing right now. And then hopefully, someone that does these things, call you back and say, hey, that's exactly what we do. You can get it for $125,000. You can have it Monday. But if
Yeah.
you call them and say, "Hey, I can do that custom build just for you," so you will say, "Oh, really? So you haven't done that before?"
Yeah.
I'm not saying it'll go that way, but I'm just saying there is the potential of the conversation derooting. So it wasn't very fancy to say late '90s that IT had to be non-customized or standardized because we all felt pride in that. But nevertheless, it happened. It got standardized and it moved the
Right.
needle a lot, and it became mass adopted in a much bigger way. We need to get to that point. And there's a lot of people doing that, but I'm just saying that is going to be that is the end game. That is the play. So what kind of technology? People always ask me, what do you know of exoskeletons? I can spell it. That's probably what I know about it. I got a ton
Yeah.
of people with me that knows about it, but again, if you don't make it mass adoptable, who cares?
Yeah. No, that's true.
It'll be a
Because then
novelty.
it's just yeah, well, it's hard to get, it
Yeah.
lowers that barrier to entry,
Yes.
you know?
So the minute it becomes
Yeah.
agreed, so the minute it becomes accessible, it'll automatically favor the humans, and hence, that's why my mom has an iPhone. That's why she can actually use it to a certain extent, right? And
Right.
and that's fine. Well, for her, it's enough, right? I remember now and again when I visit her, I close down all the 60 million, Safari browsers that she has open because
I feel
she
seen.
doesn't know how to do that. But that's my task. I get it. That's fine. But all in all, she gets it. I think when we get to that point, we're done. And that also, then you're not uncomfortable about it anymore as well. Then you're not scared about it, and then it won't take all of your jobs in your mind.
Yeah, in your mind, exactly. And I think that there's so many options for retraining and upskilling your frontline workforce to really, yeah, as I like to say on the show, give them more meaningful work. But really, I mean, this is like leveling up their career trajectories. This is giving them new obtainable skill sets, and this is increasing their wages across the board. And I'm really passionate about programs that are doing that well.
Yep.
I don't know. I wanted to ask you because you have kind of a better grasp on international workforce development, I think, than I would. But what you've seen across the Atlantic there in comparison to what anywhere in the world and the United States, right? As far as like workforce development programs, what is out there that exists that we could learn from here in the States? Or is there a program in the States that's doing workforce development really well and helping that frontline workforce reskill effectively, in your opinion?
It's funny, and I'm trying to remember the name of this. I saw a program it was up in Wisconsin that really tried to upskill, the classic manufacturing guy on the floor to
Yeah,
kind of grow into robotics. And I wish I could remember the name right now, but they really like pushed some people forward and made them kind of spokes for this. I do remember the company that used this, but that I can't share. But the
right.
company it is a big American company, and they do all kinds of edibles, and drinkables, and things like that. And they have plants in cities where not many people live. So obviously they are super dependent on people seeking their factory, to become work. And on the other hand, they also had to adopt automation because that was also their weak side, that they were so dependent on these workers. And I was up seeing some of their development programs. They work with local high schools and schools. They leaned in. I think you guys are actually pretty good at it here in the U.S. to lean into your high schools and you're
Mm.
doing programs. I mean, I saw on high school up there, I saw a local carpenter company literally sponsoring courses in carpentry, and as much as it's commoditized a little bit, it also makes sense. I mean, I obviously get why they do it because they know they can go pick the right guy that they can hire. I get it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're also teaching people a real craftsmanship based on real tasks: build a roof, build this, that, and the other. And so this company and others, were very good at re-educating their workforce into this journey of automation, this journey of robots. And I was very impressed that we met this pretty big company, and the local initiative taker on the local high school was there on the meeting too, and they knew each other very well because
Oh,
he
that's
realized,
cool.
the factory guy knew that his biggest accomplish, what do you say, whatever associate in this would be that lady from the school, because she would feed
Yeah.
into his factory, and she also had a chance of upskilling them in the way that he would need, and so on. you know so I think, if you ask me, the big skills gap right now is, we are educating and pushing, robot engineers level high, very high, and super high for innovation and these big projects. But there's somewhat of a gap between that and the guy right now stacking boxes. How do we,
Mhm.
again, commoditize these
That's
things a
my
little
thing.
more? Yeah,
Yeah.
and create a 3-week course that really tees into, hey, you're adopting AMRs. What is a what is go, what is no go? Have fun with AMRs. Do a course like that. Why don't you like tip them over and see what they do? I mean, we all, well, obviously I didn't because I'm a saint, but some of us, tipped beetles over to see how they were, turtles, to see how quick they can go around. And I'm no saint, so of course I did that too, just to see what
Yeah.
happened. Why don't we do the
In
same with
this
our Mars,
in the
right?
South, we do cow tipping. That is a
Let's not go
fun
into
that is
let's
a
not go into
fun.
that. I'm from the countryside in Denmark, so let's not go into that. But my point is just that no, but you know what I mean. We did it when we were younger to figure out what the hell happened, and I
Right.
think that's what we need, right? We know, yeah, this is a collaborative robot, so it isn't dangerous. Come demonstrate.
Right.
Let me see all my workers be assaulted by that
Exactly.
robot and see it not do that. But how can we build super simple things like that? Because that's going to lower the barriers, and it's also the minute you get over that barrier, and that, it'll turn into, hopefully, some kind of interest, because then it's not dangerous anymore. Let's approach it. I have that, with snakes, for example. We technically have two kinds of snakes in Denmark, but no one's ever seen them. But we do. They're not really venomous. But here in Tennessee, they got venomous snakes.
Oh yeah,
And I'm
you got
super scared
snakes
of that
here.
because I didn't grow up next to things like that. And on the other hand, I really want to meet one or two or three, just to see what it's like. So
Yeah,
we kind of play with that thing that we are a little bit of comfortable about. Why don't we exploit that with our workers, and use that curiosity and fear, by easing the fear, driving the curiosity, and make simple little programs that would just, you know, move them a little bit at the time to just get closer to adopting this, instead of making it a program with, 12 courses and this, that, and the other, because it
yeah,
becomes
it's hard.
inaccessible if you're, if you're not really there yet, right? So yeah, I think there's a play there. I just see too few people doing that, and I think that's the biggest workforce development that we got in front of us. Again,
See, I agree with that.
right? Oh, here's the phone.
Yep.
If we managed to do it with that one, by making little apps, and, you know solitaire, I think, have filled out an enormous gap in the IT world. I know that sounds weird, but I think for people to play solitaire on a PC
Yep.
helps. They can suddenly use a mouse, and they can, it helped them adopt, the technology by playing solitaire.
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, how many of us spent a couple of hours at least of our time playing solitaire on a PC? I mean, raise your hand, right? I mean, everybody did that. And like
Not
what's
gonna admit to
great
that.
is that you did okay, well you did that mind sweep one then maybe.
No.
But but I mean, and people's a lot of the elderly generation still do that. I mean, they still like to sit around and play solitaire.
Yeah.
Don't lie. And like
But
now we have the games on the yeah, first question anyone's kid, mine including, my kid included, is gonna say, do you have games on your phone? Like,
but
but it teaches them how to use the phone and
yeah,
the internet and the hardware, the PC, whatever.
yeah.
You're right. We
I
should
had
have a who's gonna volunteer for that of our community? Who do you think out there, robot company wise, should volunteer? Because I feel like we should have a volunteer for that.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of robot companies that drive adoption on the technical front, like the guy who's actually
Yeah,
going to run the robot. But I think,
sure.
as I said, this needs to go a step down. Not that guy, but the guy next to him, or over, whatever. But I think that's where the adoption, because that guy is eventually going to, go into. I'm not going to sit here and admit that we copied software in the 90s from companies like Microsoft, but I think they kind of allowed that we did it. Not that I, of course, never, of course, but if we did,
If you had
and
had
and
if that had happened.
yeah, if that had happened, I would have had a copy of Windows whatever, and or DOS in my case, and it would have allowed me to play with that. And which piece of software do you think I bought when I had the money for it, right? So there is just that adoption. So I think, stealing a little bit of software here and there, I'm not, thinking that's a great idea. But you follow my drift here. That
Yeah.
I think that helped a lot on the adoption, and I think a lot of these things really, really, really help. So I think, back to my mom, she normally tells me that, your niece is just so good with IT these days because she can use an iPad. Yeah, but we didn't have iPads, when I
Yeah.
was her age, and we had to program the thing. So
Yeah.
I don't think she's better with IT than so many. I'm not being insulted personally, but no, I think we helped her adopt so that she can just sit there pushing buttons and see Teletubbies. She's 13 now, so she probably don't want to do that anymore. But you know what I mean. So
I
I
do.
think we helped her, and I think that's what we have to do. So I think that's where the play is. I think software and robots going to play an enormous piece in this education on a simple level, is going to drive the adoption, because then you get the normal factory workers to say, hey buddy, I've seen this, Why can't we just do this? And instead of being only the innovation department, because it's such a fancy thing that they do, you want the guy on the floor saying, "Hey, man, we can use a robot right here because I'm sick and tired of doing this shit. I've done it for 50 years. My
Yeah.
bag is tired of it. I'm tired of it. And I
Amen.
saw this thing at a
Yeah.
trade show. It's green and it really needs whatever it is. Boom. That's the guy because then you solve the adoption problem.
Yeah. I love
So,
that. That's awesome. That's a really, yeah, and that goes back to like listening to your frontline workforce too. Like something needs to be automated. You've got one out there that's willing to tell you, I promise. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's awesome. This has been such an amazing conversation today, Soren. I really appreciate your time here with us. Those that are interested in touching base with yourself or How to Robots, what's a good way for them to reach out?
I'm at sp@howtorobot.com. That's S as in Soren, P as in Peters, funny enough. Howtorobot.com or howtorobot.com in general is a good place to get hold of me. You know, I think that's, go to the platform and, if you're interested in robotics and thinking this could make sense to you, fill out a request. We'll help you. Just go about what could make sense to you guys and get you started on automation. And if you don't know where you want to get started, do the same and we'll send a guy out to walk your factory with you and tell you what the opportunities are and what it isn't, and probably what you shouldn't do right now is one of the big things we normally say. So I think that's probably where I would lean in if I wanted to contact myself, but yeah, which I barely don't.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate your time and your viewpoints. This has been amazing for everybody that is listening into this episode of Workforce 4.0. We appreciate you. We will see you all next week. Bye.